Welcome to the end of Trans Awareness Week. I'm really excited to be with you all today and to welcome a conversation partner for us to talk about trans lives in this moment in America. My name is Avery Belyeu. I am the Regional Director for Lambda Legal's South Central Regional Office based in Dallas, Texas. And I am joined by LaLa Zannell, who is an advocate for transgender people and works with the ACLU. Welcome, LaLa.
Welcome. Thanks for having me. It's been so long since I've talked to my friends over at Lambda.
Well, thank you so much for taking this time to connect. We really wanted to, as we come to the end of Trans Awareness Week, and folks across this week hopefully have been learning and engaging and exploring, I'm really excited to have this chance to just chat with you and reflect on where we've been across the last several years as a trans community and primarily where we're hoping to go. It feels like we're at a turning point for our community. And so I'm really excited to have this conversation together. So let's start on kind of reflecting on where we've been, because the last 4 years have been a little bit challenging. So I know as we were getting started, you shared with me some kind of specific challenges that you feel like folks who are watching today should think about when they think about trans folks. So do you want to talk a little bit about this? Like, what are some of the challenges that are kind of front of your mind as you're thinking about where our community's at right now?
Well, first, I would like to say that depending on where you are in the spectrum, where you are in your margins in the LGBTQ plus movement, trans folks, particularly trans folks of color, have always felt this pressure of what our rest of our counterparts are feeling. And so now they're like, oh man, all this stuff is happening. Trump did this, Trump did this. We have been telling you this when it was trans targeted and they didn't understand it or really didn't get it or think it didn't exist or it was a real thing. And now they're living the oppression that I've been living ever since I affirmed who I was at 15 years old and I'm 42 today. And also that we're living in a pandemic. And because I'm older, some of these youth have never lived through a time of a pandemic, of a depression, of an economy crashing in this magnitude, a lockdown, having to actually physically be away from each other, where my mother and other people who are elders in my life have been around for the swine flu and other things who kind of prepared me kind of for these things. I'm from Michigan, so, I already kind of know about survival tactics, as they say, where a lot of the youth, this is stopping them. Like it's shaking their core a little bit. And also is a life lesson for us as organizers and leaders to make sure that we're passing down, that's organizing. We're passing down those things to them to prepare them for these things happening. On top of that, navigating a world that will dispose of me because I am a Black trans woman. And so like I was talking to you earlier, where some folks are now, people think your home is safe. A lot of trans folks are not safe in their homes in their neighborhoods because a lot of the neighborhoods that folks have to live in, which are low-income neighborhoods that have no understanding, that's very transphobic, that is reenacting this rhetoric that this administration is talking about. And so now folks are forced to be enslaved into their own homes, where before they get to leave their homes to come to community events, to come to, just to be in the world. And that was their freedom and their liberation. You're also seeing, as always, my community being resilient, not giving up. We'll fight in the streets. We'll fight for what they believe in, like the Supreme Court win and so many other things. But we also seen so many horrible things like the immigration bans and the abortion bans and the stop of SESTA and FOSTA, which stopped online sex for sex workers. And I'm a firm believer in decriminalizing sex work. Sex work is real work. And trans folks in the medical, trying to take away our medical rights, and trans folks in the military, and trans youth in sports. And so you're seeing all these continual attacks on a more tactical level from a very toxic administration with the stroke of a pen. It's taking away things that we were at a place where we're feeling resilient and we're feeling that we're going to be able to succeed in life. But even though that is the case, as I said at my speech in the White House, November 17th, 4 years ago, we will still have to continue to fight, no matter who is in this administration, because the system is designed for folks in the margins to fail.
Yeah.
We have to acknowledge that. And the proof of the pudding is there's no way the numbers should have been that close.
Right.
Toxic as Trump is, it should have been clear. But it's clear that there are some folks that believe in his rhetoric, believe in fascism, and believe in white supremacy, and will uphold it no matter what.
A lot of states, particularly in the South, have not only failed to pass positive legislation that would support our community and prevent discrimination, but have actively sought to pass bills that would negatively impact our community. So, not that long ago, we had bills that wanted to limit our access to public spaces, specifically restrooms, both here in Texas, North Carolina, and other places. More recently, we've seen bills that target trans youth, their access to transition-related care, and their access to equity in sports. So we've seen that across the last few years. Here in Texas, we're ramping up for a legislative session. We fully expect yet more kind of anti-trans legislation. So, as we think about all of that, what do you think is kind of our next step, not just at the federal level, but to move things in the states? Because we have a big and diverse country. What are your thoughts around how we can continue to move things forward in every state, not just in some states in the country?
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up because that is very, very important. And I was even telling my friends in the beginning process of voting, whether my friends were like, I'm not voting because I don't believe in the presidency or the electoral college, and my state's going to take it anyway, so what's the point? And then I had to tell them, you know what the point? The point is because when you go in that booth, you're not just checking your president and vice president. You have your Supreme Court. You have some cities have sheriffs. You have ballot initiatives, which there were some great ballot initiatives that were won across this country. There were some seats that flipped. There were some amazing states that went blue that they're shocked that they shouldn't. And so just that way, let's push that momentum and understand that federal is great, but we must also work where we lay our head. I always say my job every day I leave my house is to battle the white supremacy and all the things I put in my mind. And when I go into the world, because even though I'm a trans person, those things still show up. And I need to make sure that when I'm interacting with my neighbor, that I'm bringing my neighbor with me to that journey. I'm bringing the person I get my bagel from at my bodega, my corner store. I need to be seeing what's going on in the school boards in my neighborhood and my board 10 meetings. I need to go down to city council and hear what's going on and actively participating in the culture change on the city, state, personal, and federal level. And so that is the goal, to actively participate and give community members and folks tools on the ground how to do those things. I think the one thing about the pandemic that even though the pandemic's horrible, but one thing I say that I liked about it is the fact that we've created so many tools where they can't say it can't happen anymore. You see so many different states have created tools to stop people from mass incarceration, folks being released for petty fines and fees. And so we're learning that when a pandemic hits, some of these things that you say were necessary, we have proven are not necessary. We have found ways to leverage money and mutual aid and do all these amazing things in a crisis pandemic mode that when this is over, we can say, you know what, let's continue that. We don't need DAs to prosecute sex work offenses or petty small distribution drug offenses or these things. We don't need those things anymore, pandemic or not. We're keeping people out of the system. And so I think that that's one thing that we could continue to pressure on and put on. And also, like I said, these states that had these amazing ballot initiatives in Georgia, I want a Zoom organizing class from all of those folks. Because they did some amazing work. And I'm so inspired by that. And so I think that gives me hope.
Right.
Because there were spots that just was like, wow. And this gave me hope that this state could change over and flip blue and that people in that state are tired of this rhetoric. And so I think that also gave me hope.
I love that. So I love how you're describing the importance of voting, because that impacts what's happening in your backyard and on your street, in your neighborhood, in your state. You know, the other thing that I think is really fantastic when we think about the states, and we do have an uphill battle in a lot of them, but is the number of trans folks that were elected to public office in this election. And that speaks to that necessity of voting, but also of us running for office, right? And for folks working with us to say, yes, you should run for public office. And I think that is an amazing, that is something that's giving me a lot of hope for where our country is going, that all these amazing trans folks ran for public office, were elected, and hopefully we're going to just continue to see more of that. We have to think about all the intersections that we live in, with the understanding that the trans community is very big, very diverse, represents a lot of people. You and I are just two individuals and part of a very diverse community. You know, I love how you kind of talked about all that's happened across the last 4 years with Trump, which has been really challenging for our community, but particularly this crisis of COVID-19, and how, as this administration is coming in, and I think we'll talk about that in a minute, that they need to think about who is being most impacted by COVID-19 and the folks most on the margins. You know, I live in Texas. So I live in Texas, kind of weird state. I don't know if it's really the South, but I live in a part of the country that is not welcoming for trans folks. Very specifically, our state politics, that trans folks are constantly under attack. And there are, you know, there's more barriers to healthcare, for example, for trans folks, especially in a place like Texas, than there might be in some other parts of the country. So I think it is really important to name that our community is really being impacted by multiple things at once. And that's impacted by a lot of factors like geography and your lived experience and intersectionality of various identities that you hold. So I think that's all so important to say. And my mind is in much of a similar place, I will say to you, living in Texas, because of the signs I see in my neighborhood, I was not necessarily so surprised that the margin was so small. And I completely agree with you. It says a lot that margin was so small. So obviously, electoral politics is on all of our minds right now. So I love where you were headed with talking about the next administration. And so, you know, I would love to say to you, as somebody who stood up at the White House and given a speech about trans rights, you know, as we're thinking about, and I have some answers to this too, we're thinking about what we would like to see from President-elect Joe Biden and his administration. And particularly in the first 100 days, like we just kept it to 100 days, like what I'm really curious here, what would you like to see happen in that first 100 days for our community?
Oh my gosh, there's so many things. But I would not be remiss to say, like I said, November 17th, tomorrow, will be the anniversary of the last trans briefing from 4 years ago before this new administration came in. And I just want to thank President Obama for taking the opportunity. Even along the way, we were still educating Obama. When people wanted to just make it seem like, oh, he gave us marriage equality, all these things, we had to push him to change those thoughts that were put in his mind. It is a process. And to see a president be able to line it with those intersections and margins and see us and actually invite us to Pride events and invite us to testify and be a part of Women's History Month is very powerful. And it's a part of history that Marsha and Sylvia wanted. You know, that this is what our ancestors wanted us to be fighting for. And so this first 100 days, I want to see them authentically bring folks in to help them to challenge those intersections and be able to bring in them on all issues. There should be trans folks in all the issues to be able to have that context and that expert knowledge. In a world, I would love to see my sister Raffi be back down to Capitol Hill, who was the first advisor to the President of the United States making history. I would love Biden to call her back. I would love to see Ashley Preston and Angelica Ross and Shea Diamond and Blossom and all these amazing leaders who were, let's not forget, in the moment where we're saying, yes, Black women did it. Black women upped the vote. They changed states blue, but I would not be remiss if I would not add my history in there. that there were amazing radical Black trans women that I just named who were pushing the queers and pushing the trans vote. And folks like Jack Mizrahi and Sanaya who were pushing the ballroom vote by having balls and promoting let's vote and themes around voting. And so like these things that the bigger world did not see that I was witnessing that were happening. I was witnessing town halls led by trans leaders with presidential candidates and challenging them. And so I want to continue to see that. It's because when the world of our naysayers see us in those roles and see us really being active participants in the ways of the world that they don't want us to, that is where culture shift happens. And it's going to be difficult and it's going to be hard. But I'm counting on Biden and Harris to really challenge the status quo. When you're talking about unifying the race and unifying the country, you have to include queerness. You have to embody Black trans lives when you're talking about racism and Black lives. We have to talk about the toxic masculinity and how fragile it is and how Black men don't have the outlet to understand that when we have systems that encourage that. Our system can't be throw them in jail and punish them when the system says it's okay to do these things. But we have to show them and model that we can coexist and that we are real thought leaders and not a role that is tokenizing or to say we have one on the team, but actually a part of it. That's what unifying means. And doing what no administration ever did, honestly, was authentically hire trans folks in the administration. And we also can lead things outside of our transness. Because I'm more than a Black trans woman. I'm a mother. I'm a daughter. I have all these facets of me. I have a family. I have nieces and nephews and brothers that I have to be worried about due to police brutality. So all these other issues still impact me. Trans masculine folks are impacted by health, reproductive health as well. We forget them in those conversations. And so making sure that you have everyone in all those margins and the part of that unifying part. I want to see some trans folks in a row in a section during that inauguration. I want to see my people there. That is how you unify. And so that's my hope for the first 100 days.
I love it. And some of the things I really love that you said, I love everything you said, but one of the things I really love is to say that hire trans folks, right? So that's the call to the Biden-Harris administration, hire trans folks. We've already seen that evidently with one appointment. So they're starting and not just to focus on LGBTQ rights and trans rights, but to recognize that we are across issues and that our experiences speak to everything from education to the economy to healthcare. And so to hire qualified trans folks to talk across all those issues, I think that's so enormously powerful. And, I will say, I was very heartened for him to name transgender people in that first speech. It was really, it's kind of emotional, I'll be honest.
The first step is acknowledging it.
100%.
You have to understand like how this 4 years worked. It was a long road. I'm pretty sure Biden and Harris are still just breathing it and taking it in that they actually won. Because it was very, very hard. So like give them time and like let's hold them accountable in the same ways that we held Trump accountable and Obama and the Clintons and the Bushes and so on and so on. We will continue to hold those systems accountable, but let's give them the tools and give them time to build those infrastructures. And it's important when people think about cross issues, even for me as an organizer, sometimes I have to leave my community. I'm always going back to women's rights organizing and garment organizing and the Black Panthers and Lords and the migration movement. I'm always going back to different movements that does not necessarily correlate with me because there's tools of learning. How do they organize that? How do they do that? Is there something that I'm missing in my organizing? So I call my friends who are not a part of my community sometimes to get their think on things or see what they're working on, because that's what organizing is about. You never stop organizing, and don't think because we don't live the same experience that I can't learn something from your movement or vice versa.
Right. So there's so much. I love too, we were talking about kind of, you hope you see some folks sitting in those seats in the inauguration. And I think part of what I'm thinking about, this week has been Trans Awareness Week. So it's to kind of raise the visibility of our community, to take an entire week, which I'm really grateful for. So it's not just a day, right? But an entire week to say, look at all of these amazing trans people, look at all these stories, and yes, look at the ways that we're continually marginalized, oppressed. Let's talk about all of that. And so I think the first step really starts oftentimes with us just showing up and being visible and being present and being invited to have a seat at the table. I think so often we function from this scarcity mindset, right? That there's like only so much space around the table. But in reality, the image I love to think about is we just need to create a bigger table and pull up more chairs so that all those folks who need a seat at that table have a seat. I love all these charges. I hope that the Biden-Harris administration is listening carefully to this conversation because I think there are some great suggestions here about how to like meaningfully and authentically engage. That's what I'm hearing is about meaningful and authentic engagement that goes beyond just tokenism, which I think a lot of us in our community struggle with that a lot. So I think going beyond tokenism and being meaningfully and authentically engaged would go a really long way. And yes, we still have to hold folks accountable. So this brings me to my last kind of two questions, which is, when we look at where all the progress we've made. I mean, you were sharing with me kind of earlier about, your age, which I will not reveal on a social media broadcast. But you've seen change, right? And I have too. Yeah. And a lot of it has happened quickly, some of it more slowly. This is a week to me where we do take time to reflect, where we name particularly the Black transgender women who have been murdered, who have lost their lives. And we take a moment to pause, to acknowledge that, and to commit to doing something more about it in the year ahead. So that those statistics go down and decrease and the lives of people are meaningfully changed. And I think that is so important. And I'm also wondering, as you look to this year ahead, what are the things that are giving you hope? What are the things that are giving you hope about where we are, where our community is at this moment? What are the kind of opportunities for hope that you're able to find?
I'm just moving in the ways that I should still be moving. I'm still trying to keep Marsha and Sylvia's their legacy alive, but also I believe that there's generational curses. I believe that there's lessons to be learned from all generations. And I believe that, this thought that trans women of color have to always be in the forefront all the time and garnish all their blood in the streets and garnish all the labor. It's time to let other people bear those hits for us. It is okay for us to leave the movement for a while and thrive to do other things and be entrepreneurs and anything else in life. And I think that sometimes trans folks get stuck because it's such a big movement and nonprofits love to hire us and it makes them look good and it makes them look down and it makes certain places look like they're inclusive and it like validates them. But we have to start empowering ourselves. And as you said, stop making ourselves feel small or sitting in the back and actually standing up and saying that we belong here. We belong the same dignity as every other person that's on in this country. Even our undocumented folks, they're deserving to be and having treated with as a human and respect, but also that we are more than just your numbers for you to say, this is the deadliest year again. We are more than just to say, we have a trans person working here. We have dreams, we have aspirations, we have trans folks who are parents, who want to be parents. There's other parts of different issues that people forget us because they don't believe, trans folks, they just want to be visible and they just want, all these, laws. No, we also want access to wealth, access to entrepreneur opportunities and new entrepreneur loans and access to housing developments and all these other things and for access to children and everything. And people sometimes forget those things because they're so wrapped up in just who we are with the trans part and so worried about our sexual parts and what's the difference, what's this non-binary thing, just being so quick to be resistant to just looking at us as human beings and looking at us as folks who are wholeheartedly a part and have contributed to so many movements, even in silence. Mm. Yeah, that we've always
that is so powerful. That's so powerful to say that we are building movements and contributing to movements and living lives that go outside of just our transness, right? Yeah. And I think that's so important to say, particularly in a week like this, where folks are really focused on like, who are trans people? And let's learn more about their issues. Well, guess what? We are complicated and nuanced and multifaceted beings.
Yeah. And most of the complications, sorry to cut you off, most of the complications come from them. And so like, they don't even understand the part that they play in our oppression.
Right.
You know, particularly folks who really have a lot of privilege, folks who are white, let's be honest, folks who are men, and they just have the right to say, I don't get it, I need a training. Who purposely choose to continue to misgender you, to continue to act like gender doesn't, you know, that's not a social construct, that people just use that privilege to purposely oppress and hurt people. Those are the ones I'm really talking about. And so you have to look at both sides. Like, no, a lot of the stuff we go through is because you cause it. Because you refuse to let your privilege move enough so I don't be hurt, so I can be loved, so I don't be misgendered and called all those horrible names, so my body is not abused and just disrespected. And so I'm not a fetish, or I'm not a piece of flesh that you can just do whatever to me because I'm trans. No, I'm still human. I still gonna bleed like you. I still can catch corona just like everyone else. My transness has not separated me from any other human tragedy or human thing that we go through in life. And I think sometimes people just think it's a separate thing, including folks who are of color. Like, oh no, it's not the same. No, I can't take this off.
Right.
I'm Black and I'm trans, one and the same. And those two margins are causing me lots of oppression. And sometimes it's coming from folks that look like me.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that is, I think, like kind of giving me hope right now is, one, I do think, and I've even seen in the last, like, I would say even 3-4 years, even during the Trump administration, I feel like we have come a long way in public understanding of transness. And partially maybe, unfortunately, because of the negative attacks against us, people are like, what is going on? We raise the red flag. So I feel like that is giving me hope. And I think the other thing I would name really similarly to yourself is, one of the things that's giving me hope right now is to see that so many beautiful, amazing trans people are doing exactly the things you've described. They are building families. We are building our lives and our communities, our businesses, right? All of those things that you listed, having robust careers and things that aren't just the social justice movement and the civil rights movement, right? And that's really giving me hope. The creativity and the ingenuity and the power of trans people together, coming together in community to say, let's make something happen for our community, even beyond just, again, our civil rights or protecting our rights, but let's build something, a movement for wholeness and a movement for a bigger vision of what it can be to thrive as trans people. And that, I think, is really giving me a lot of hope for where we're headed, despite all the challenges we face, and particularly the challenges we faced across the last 4 years. Well, I have just loved this conversation. It has been such a pleasure to connect with you all. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day and your busy schedule to huddle with me and talk about where we are and where we're going. Again, I hope folks have really enjoyed listening to this conversation. I certainly hope that the Biden-Harris administration has been listening to this conversation. And that's right. And hopefully this will not be the last time that we get a chance to connect and chat.
I hope not as well.